Hello. Welcome to the first episode of Work in Progress. I'm your host, Barbara. And I want to say at the very top of this episode, if you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much. This will also be broadcasted on any streaming podcast service that you listen to your favorite podcast, and I hope that I'm one of them. So let's get into the purpose of this episode. I am going to be talking about why the podcast went MIA for basically 3 years. So for those who've been a part of the journey of Work in Progress in season 1, the podcast has been a labor of love, a passion project around a time period of my life where I just needed a creative outlet to have autonomy. If you're a creative person, you know what I'm talking about. And I was going full speed ahead with this project. Had monthly listeners, everything was great. And then the pandemic happened. But the pandemic was not the problem, as most people probably had that as a problem. The pandemic was just an event, a global event that affected the entire world. In my reality, what happened was that I decided to move countries in the middle of the pandemic. Because why not? So this is where the story begins. Okay. So I'm going to be recollecting the past 3 years in this episode. So around the time that the pandemic hit, I was in the U.S., back home in Miami, wearing this lovely shirt, if you are seeing it. Yes, very iconic. And when I was home at the time, I was freelancing. I was employed on my own, finding my own clients in what I do and know best of social media and all the things digital marketing. And I was transitioning out of the TV news industry as I studied broadcast and digital journalism at my university in Los Angeles. No, not UCLA. Thank you. And after I had graduated, I dove right into my career, and from one position to the other, I ended up going back home working for a Spanish language TV network. I was there for about a year, and then in that moment of my life, I thought, okay, what will truly bring me the happiness that I always wanted? And if you are watching and you know me, you know that this has been a long time coming of a dream. For 4 years in the making, dated up until 2020. So in 2016, 2020, 4 years, you do the math. And I finally put my move abroad, full focus, center stage, like the whole thing. And it just played out in a way that it just happened to be that I needed to move during the middle of the pandemic. And now, for those, and I have to clear up some rumors here. For those people that thought that I moved to Germany for a man, it was not to this particular man. Yeah. And if you're watching, no, I did not move for you. I moved for myself. So, in 2016, had studied abroad in the Basque Country of Spain. Yes. And I had a beautiful experience. And from that, it opened my mind to other possibilities of living somewhere else that wasn't the U.S. Very grateful for the opportunities that the U.S. gave me, still am, but I wanted to expand my horizons and live elsewhere beyond the hustle culture that living in the U.S. brings to a lot of Americans. And in 2020, as I was freelancing, doing an interview with a source for a story, it was this Mexican girl who was living in Germany at the time. And after interviewing her, I was like, oh, let me change hats here and ask her how she did the move, Exactly what she told me is what I did, like carbon copy. And I signed up, created a profile for myself on this au pair website, had no agency, did this all on my own. I had no idea exactly what an au pair was or did. I did my research prior to submitting myself to a website and creating this whole profile, making sure how the experience was for other young girls. And I said, well, why not? This is my take it in. And whatever it is that you believe in, if you want to call it divine timing, even though there was a pandemic, I had a family who managed to bring me over to Germany. And I set my sights out to 2 specific places. So it was like a small town, you could say small, but let's say a city town in the north of Italy and Germany. So I opened myself to an entire country or this one specific place, but I wanted to be in Europe for more than a short period of time. And the opportunity opened up itself for me to come to Germany for a year, which is how long being an au pair lasts if you're not a EU citizen. So did that, and I kid you not, within less than 2 months' time, the process expedited itself so quickly that by the summer of 2020, I moved to Germany. Bum, bum, bum. So you think, oh my gosh, she finally made it. She made it. But no, I did not. The romance and all that honeymoon phase only lasted a little bit longer upon my arrival. And once I arrived, is when things started to kind of go a little unexpected. So I don't really want to, and let me preface this, I have to be careful and delicate around the matter because it is something that I am talking about for the first time. And considering that other people are involved in this situation, I will have to protect their identity as much as I would love to drag them because they deserve it. So I moved in with a family in a pretty wealthy neighborhood in Germany. And I was brought into their home as another family member, or as that is how it was presented to me. When I was interviewed, and I went through 3 rounds, more or less, to be this family's first au pair, everything seemed fine. The interactions with the family seemed fine. Everything normal. I asked as much questions as possible, and they were super generous and giving. And so I was ready to get on that flight. So much to the point that I think my parents thought it was too good to be true. You know, your flight paid for, all that. So after I landed, I had a month to, let's say, assimilate to the German culture and society. It was the summer, so you can imagine great weather. People were in good spirits. And I had lived in Europe before, so it wasn't my first rodeo. After that first month of being here is when I had to start working my duties as an au pair. So what does that look like? Usually it comes from you driving. If the family provides you with a car, which mine did, the family drives you to, or you have to drive the kid or children to the school, run errands, little things like that. There is obviously a weekly commitment, time commitment. Let me be specific on that. And the expectations are pretty basically laid out with a schedule, this time to this time, and you kind of negotiate that with the family. And you get your monthly, let's just say stipend, because I didn't have to pay for accommodation or food. They had to take care of that. So after that happened, I remember that the first couple of weeks working as an au pair, things were a little stressful because I was trying to understand certain duties and chores and expectations from the family. And obviously, when you live with people, people have certain standards. And if you don't meet them, then they get aggravated and all that stuff. I didn't notice that I was developing some sort of PTSD from the situation because it was always like waking up at the crack ass of dawn to start my job for a couple of hours, go on somewhat seemed like a break. In between all of those hours of a break, I had to go to, it's not mandatory, but like strongly encouraged language courses that were intensive for like 3 hours long, 4 times a week. Come back, continue my duties as an au pair, and by the end of it, I would probably be done by like 8 p.m., let's just say. However, as structured as that may sound, it is physically demanding and mentally exhausting when sometimes where your employer is basically the same place where you are sleeping. So the boundaries are very much gray and blurred. You live where you work. And so those dynamics between the family and I were extremely confusing. And I would like to say that I'm not the kind of person to just say, fuck you, I don't want to do this. Because obviously I was very grateful for them bringing me over. But the expectations were getting way out of hand. On top of the fact that this person had a cleaning lady and I was what seemed like an additional cleaning person, which is not the role of an au pair. Yeah. And you got paid shit. Like, they were being generous enough to pay me 400 euros a month. If you live in Munich, you know that's not a lot. And you want to kind of have a decent social life. So it's not like we're going out as au pairs, especially during that time. Nobody ever went out to like bars or anything because everything was closed. But just public transportation alone is already pricey as it is. Some au pairs got paid 280 euros. Also really sad. But I hope someday that law gets changed because it's absurd. So, anywho, you kind of get treated like a nanny, but you don't get the nanny salary. So, all that being said, as the time goes on, it was like the environment in that house was incredibly toxic. I almost felt like I didn't even know what I was getting myself into every single day, what I was waking up to, how the kid was going to react to me because it was a big language barrier. His English was barely even there. And my purpose in that house was to help him reinforce his English skills since he was going to, let's just say, a private school that was bilingual speaking. So English was important for him to speak. And that wasn't the case in the house. Everything was mostly in German. Obviously, the father of the house had a good grasp of the English language, and we managed to speak amongst us too. But the wife of the house had a certain expectations of what I should have done and been doing and all this stuff, and it never seemed like it was ever enough, even though I felt like, give you a perfect example. There was one time where I was told by the mom of the house that I needed to hand wash every single spoon, fork, and knife by hand washed and hand dried, when they had a perfectly good dishwasher, state of the art, brand new. But no, because if anyone knows how to use the dishwasher, it leaves stains on the I guess you could say like a water stain or whatever that is on the utensils, and some people just don't like it if you have extreme OCD, and it seemed like she did undiagnosed. So imagine that was just a typical morning. Even though I was supposed to be off during those hours, I was still left with these ridiculous chores that would take me over an hour plus. So I feel like I'm getting a little bit diplomatic here, but it's because it is a very sensitive time of my life. And I'm just speaking about it in hindsight. I think at the time, had I recorded this podcast talking about my feelings and emotions about being an au pair at the time, I probably would have been on the floor crying. I'm going to fast forward. So this is like, I think what the straw, what's the saying? The straw that broke the camel's back. I think that's how it goes. There was a normal day in that house, like any other day. I go out into the kitchen to fulfill my duties. One of them obviously was to take the kid to school. And I was making, what was it? Brownies. And I forget. And the brownies are really good, may I say. Like, they had me acting like I was Betty Crocker or Martha Stewart. And I was baking brownies. First time ever in my life. And they came out delicious. Well, I didn't even get the chance to eat them because as I was going upstairs, because the mom had a habit in calling me almost every morning on FaceTime to say goodbye to her son before he went off to school. I went upstairs. They chatted. He was in his parents' bedroom reading some sort of magazine. And after the phone call conversation, he asked me in German, which I, at this point, was understanding a little bit more and more every day as I was like going through, life in Germany. The child asked me, hey, can you please remove the staple on the magazine? I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I get like a tweezer and I remove the staple from the magazine that was like the hinge to it. And obviously, naturally, what happens? The magazine unloosens itself into multiple pages, no longer holding like a magazine. And you can't even believe the crap, the shit show that came out of that. The tantrum of the fucking century. This child, excuse me, the F-bombs, but this is like the most unbelievable thing I'd ever experienced from a little kid who was 5 years old, destroying, which he proceeded to destroy his parents' bedroom after he was like, ah, like I think it was like a moment where he was just like, I don't understand why you don't understand me. But instead of just having a conversation, because obviously the language barrier was like difficult for him, he decided to proceed to smack the crap out of me. And yes, that sounds hilarious. But in reality, getting your ass beat by a 5-year-old is not fun. So it went from getting punched in the chest, getting my face smacked, to then that was not being enough. And the whole entire bedroom being torn apart into like pieces. Pillows on the floor, sheets on the ground, like the mattress has slipped. Like, you're thinking, this is a 5-year-old? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is a 5-year-old. I had no patience for that, and I immediately called the father while he was at work. This was becoming almost like a daily thing, so to him it wasn't that surprising that I was calling him again in the morning to complain about his son and trying to calm him down. And he tells me, look, let me talk to my son. He's trying to calm him down. And ultimately, I think the purpose here was take my son to school. So I did that. But before getting to the point of getting my butt into the car with the child, I have to change him into his street clothes, his school clothes. He was in pajamas at this point. So I proceed to go to the bathroom. I switch from one room to the other. And as I go back into the original room where this child is having the temper tantrum, I'm in panic, so I'm not thinking much. And I see, as I'm walking down this little step that I have to go into the bedroom, I guess I don't see what is on the floor. I slip on something. I lose my balance. And all I hear was a loud crack. And yes, that was my fucking bone. Yeah. It was my bone. So I think I still have the crutches here. Of that fateful day that I remember even having plans later. Yeah, that got canceled. I lost my balance. Let's just say, lost my balance, fell to the ground in panic, in pain, in agony. And the father was like, what happened? He didn't see me, but he heard me fall to the floor. And I was like, I think I broke my foot. And there is where everything begins. So the father comes within 30 minutes time from his job to the house because clearly I got hurt on the job. And the kid immediately switched in his behavior. He was super nice to me, felt like responsible for what happened. But at that moment, like, fuck it. Like, my attitude, my mood, my everything was just like, I do not have time for this. I do not want you near me. Do not touch me. Please. Thank you. Bye. And I was rushed to the hospital and with the diagnosis of, yes, your foot is broken and you have to be in recovery for 6 weeks. 6 weeks with a boot. A very uncomfortable boot that I had to wear at night with crutches that were extremely uncomfortable. And I felt like a vegetable. Yes. So I cannot begin to tell you how many times I have been in the unfortunate position, where I had to, in the middle of the night, drag my sorry ass, literally my sorry ass, through the floor just to pee and come back to the bedroom. It was horrible. Like, I wish I had like actual footage that I recorded back then, like webcam footage, so you would see how much I dragged myself on the floor simply just to pee and go back to the bed in the middle of the night while my foot was broken. And so all that, also having to get injections in my stomach to avoid like blood clotting. Like, it was this whole thing. I had bruises on my stomach for a moment. It was awful. Eventually what happened was that this family terminated my contract, let's say 3 months into my recovery process. So halfway in, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's winter at this point. We're not far away from Christmas, and they basically terminated my contract. And so many people would have been running back home, crying about the situation. I, on the other hand, decided to say, no, I am not going to take my sorry ass home because I came over here for a purpose, a mission, a reason. There was a feeling, and I have to trust it. And I wanted to trust it, and I am trusting it. Still here. You couldn't get rid of me. So I'm back. I'm here. We're recovering. We switched families. I'm going to make this part of the story a little bit shorter, because after that, basically, it was like 6 months of me still being an au pair with a different family. They were great. They were stupendous for even accepting me in such a short amount of time. It was a transition period of my life that thankfully I survived. So fast forward, we're now in 2021, and I finished my duties as an au pair. I move into this fab apartment that you see around me. And as a little au pair with my little shitty salary, I made some money in the sense of saving a lot and making it work. And then in that process, I hustled to getting a job. I got a job as an English teacher at a private kindergarten, which shall not be named. That experience for a lot of people is, I would say, difficult, physically taxing, mostly, I would say. Having 20 children at a time in a classroom is exhausting. I mean, they're cute, they're great. Love that moment. It was a great learning experience for me in developing a lot of patience and developing strong communication skills, not just with the children, but with your employees, which is super important during this time, because I mean, despite it being a bilingual private kindergarten, the people that managed it were German, so most of my colleagues would speak to me in German, and I think my level of German from that grew exponentially. But that lasted only 5 months. My heart really, as time went on, wasn't in it. Waking up so early to go to work. I mean, for the pay too, I grew such a fond amount of respect for teachers after that. So much that they deserve massages on a weekly basis, not monthly, and gifts and all that, because they do not get paid enough, which is really tragic. But now we fast forward to what it is today, and we are now working at an agency relevant to what I studied in the world of journalism and communications. And I think that's the story. Now, I don't know what other questions some of you may have, so I'll let you down below in this video, if you're watching on YouTube, to comment, ask me questions, and I'd be more than happy to engage. Like, oh, but talk about this in the next episode, about your love life, all that stuff, because I feel like I will get into that. Obviously, that is the nitty gritty, meaty stuff that people want to hear, all the dirty secrets of my love life, but we're not going to get into that in that episode. That's going to be for another one. I did just want to talk about a little bit about the transition. Now, you got the gist. Now, I think a lot of people might be asking, why did you leave the US? Why did you change careers? I will say this. After my study abroad experience in 2016, me, along with a bunch of other Americans in that program, felt very much the same, and I had a massive internal awakening. I noticed that I was much happier living a much life-centered, what's the word I'm looking here for? I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling with this. I wanted a more, now I wouldn't say that. I would say I wanted a more life-driven, that's it. A life-driven lifestyle versus what I was dealing with at 22 years old up until I was like 24. In those 2 years, I managed to burn out twice from an industry that was never going to love me back, because I have so many colleagues in the industry that have spent 10 plus years of their life in a career that ended up sucking the life out of them, driving them to depression, if not alcoholism, which a lot of journalists do love to drink, and that's okay. But you got to find coping mechanisms, and that's why you hit the bottle after seeing so many people dying on a daily basis, because that's part of the job. I don't regret studying what I studied, and I actually love the fact, I will forever be a journalist. That is what I have on paper in my bachelor's degree, and I did have some years of experience with it, and I still have a lot of dear, near friends in the industry. However, as I was getting older and I realized working in the industry, my colleagues did not inspire me. And that it is a statement. My friends did, but the colleagues that I was working with weren't, because they were obviously much older, but the age isn't what I'm focusing on here. In fact, I suffered from a lot of ageism. Like, there's racism, there's sexism, but ageism is a topic that I never experienced until I started working at 22 amongst people that were like 30 plus years older than me, and looking at me like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing because she's so like new, and like, oh, like it was just undermining my skills and abilities to doing a job where it's like, if you just give me the chance and opportunity and you teach me, I could prove you wrong. But the longer that you're in an industry like that, the more that you realize that there is a lot of what I like to call newsroom politics that nobody teaches you when you're studying in undergrad or probably even grad school. So with all that being said, I eventually grew more and more into the consciousness of accepting my reality and saying, do I want this lifestyle? Do I want to see my life like this for the rest of my life? Like, do I want to make the sacrifices in my personal life? Will I have to reconsider having a family? Like, will I be okay with taking my personal life as a backseat and feeding into a career that I'm constantly going to be on edge with anxiety, with developing these potential negative habits, bad habits, And when I gave myself that hard look in the face at 24 years old and I asked myself those questions, it was very clear to me that the things that I wanted when I was 20, 21 years old was very clear, and that had to be put in focus. So fast forward to so many years later, 4 years later, since I had that realization back in 2019, here I am in Munich, Germany. Not to say that Munich, Germany is the paradise, because clearly I do miss a nice tan moment and a nice beach moment and a nice half naked moment, but we're not there, and that's fine. This is all to just tell you that if you are in a place in your life and you realize that you've either hit rock bottom like I did, you could always start over. It's never too late, and you should always give yourself grace and kindness, and remember to find or try to find the courage to start over. I actually want to be able to see if I could find it from one of my favorite movies, which I will quote, which is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And I didn't even know this, but it's actually written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. But basically, towards the end of the movie, Benjamin Button writes, I guess, like a postcard to his daughter. And she's reading it for the first time. And he's kind of giving her like life advice. So here we are, getting deep, getting personal, getting wise. He writes, for what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. And I hope you make the best of it. I hope you see things that startle you. And I hope you feel things you never felt before. I hope you meet people who have a different point of view. And I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. And so I'm going to leave everyone with that note and that message. I hope everyone could find the courage to start over again. If you've reached this part, this part of the video towards the end, I want to say thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Give it a rating wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast. Comment, engage with me on social media. You know where to find me, Work in Progress Media, or my personal Instagram account on Holla It's Barbara. That's HOLLA. And Barbara, not like Barbara Streisand, BARBARA. But yes, I hope this has encouraged you to look at your life and make the choices that you should make, because you have the ability to do it. If you have the thought, you have the power and the willpower and the ability to just move forward no matter where you are in life. And so if I could do it, I'm no one special, then you can as well. So thank you everyone for tuning to this episode of Work in Progress. I will see you on the next one.